and welcome to Season 7, Episode 1 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And we are reading Peter Kreeft's A Refutation of Moral Relativism, Interviews with an Absolutist. It's our first episode talking about this book. We read the first chapter for today, titled, let me see if I can find the title of this chapter, The Importance of Moral Relativism. Will it really damn our souls and end our species? Is the first chapter here. This is very different from any other book that we've read for the podcast, so I want to hear what you think about it first before we start talking about what's in it.
Okay. I feel like I have my NPR voice on.
Yeah, I don't know why you're so tired all of a sudden.
I don't think it's all of a sudden. I think I am tired all the time, every day.
That's not good.
Well, I'm overweight, not out of shape, and it exhausts me to just carry on
This is a good start
essential
for
daily activities.
This is a good first episode here.
So I like it. I'm kind of curious to how we're gonna talk about this book.
Well, I mean, we said, when we were talking about the next book, we wanted something more that was like a jumping off point rather than something we're just listing what's in the book. And I think this gives us a good opportunity to do that.
Yes. So what the book is essentially a dialogue between two fictitious characters. One being
Isa ben Adam is the first one.
Is the moral absolutist who is presumably Muslim.
Yes, he's Muslim.
And then the Libby, short for Liberty, is like a journalist, a leftist, kind of garden variety leftist type character, I think.
I think he even describes her as a sassy black feminist, is how he describes that character. Those are his words.
Yes, as if somebody would describe her as that, rather than he just described her as that.
What do you mean?
As a literary technique. Oh. Like, he didn't just say, Libby is a sassy black character.
I think he did.
No, he said someone would describe her.
Oh, okay, I see.
Anyway, and then Kreeft does make an appearance because it's said as if it's at his
an interview at his house between these two people.
Did you understand the interview with a vampire reference?
I did not. No, he references that in the introduction.
I think it was a Tom Cruise movie. It was a book and made into a movie. I think it was Tom Cruise and a young girl actress who became very famous. Her name escapes me now. Very popular thing. Like the vampires were. It seems like they come and go at times. But anyway, so it's. It's set up. It's it flows so easy. It's so easy to read these kind of books where it's conversational.
Yeah,
and you can just kind of you feel like you're just sitting in the room. It's very well written. I can already tell I like it. Yeah, and I'm going to enjoy reading it.
It's very very short. The book overall,
read.
Isn't very long. This first chapter was like 11 pages. So it's not a very long book. So
I think we have to, rather than just summarizing, what the book is saying. So we're going to use this as a jumping off point. So I have a couple topics that I have notes.
Oh, you wrote in the book. That's great.
I always write my books.
Yeah, I hate that. I can't stand that.
These will be memorials to my brilliant thoughts, and they will live beyond me.
That's great.
Actually, what it'll mean is if I don't throw these books away before I die, you'll be cursed with having them because you'll think, God, I don't want to throw that away because Dad wrote in that, and maybe I'll find some, higher meaning in it, but you won't because number one, you probably won't be able to read much of them, and then they're just phrases that only mean something to me. So.
Well, maybe one day you'll be as famous as Tolkien, and I can just churn out a whole bunch of books like describing all of your notes on other things.
That would require me to work and write down at length, like book length stuff. And as I mentioned, I'm tired all the time.
This is a very uplifting episode already.
So moral relativism.
Is that the jumping off point? That was the discussion point? So moral relativism, that's what we're talking about?
Yeah, so the first topic is, okay, the idea is this is going to be a multi-day, interview process. And so Libby, the character Libby asks, she's interviewing, she's like a journalist, and she's interviewing this Issa, I guess is what he goes by.
Yes.
What is the point? What's the importance of moral absolutism, and why we even, why would society, why would that benefit society. I don't think they even really got to that.
Yeah, not really.
So it's kind of like similar to other dialogues where they talk about other things until they get to the final truth. But what are your thoughts? I think, well, you have a lot of thoughts about moral relativism.
Probably.
What are your? So I enjoyed it,
Yes.
and I'm going to have some jumping off points, which I'm going to ask you about your thoughts, and then I will tell you which ways you were wrong.
As usual.
But what were your thoughts about
I mean, I
this
enjoyed
first
it. I read this earlier this week, so it's not terribly fresh in my mind right now. But no, I mean, I enjoyed reading it. It was easy to get through. I think the dialogue made sense.
Yes.
It wasn't just, we're just suddenly talking about something else. It seemed to flow like an actual conversation, which I liked. I mean, he's like what you said, he's a very talented writer.
Yeah.
I guess we could talk a little bit about him too.
Yeah, why
I
don't
mean, what I know about him is he's a convert to Roman Catholicism. So that's a big part, I think, of his identity. He's written all kinds of books on Catholicism and the overall philosophy of Christianity and stuff like that. I actually just read his whole book on the philosophy of Tolkien. I went through that in like a day. It was a pretty simple read, or a pretty short read, I guess I should say, but really interesting. He's got a great writing style, tackles the big questions pretty well, I think. So I'm looking forward to reading the rest of the book. But I liked the first chapter. To answer your question.
The good summary. The first thing that jumped out at me in this conversation, they're trying to talk about, okay, how are we going to talk about moral relativism? What are we going to do? What she wants to ask him, okay, how does society harmed by moral relativism or benefited by moral absolutism? And his belief is that it's going to destroy society. So she kind of starts that off as the discussion. And the one thing that I thought was really clever, which I hadn't thought of, which is modern Western society is the first time in world history that we have a governmental system that's set up on the basis of moral relativism presently. It wasn't initially set up that way, but our current rulers are all moral relativists.
Yeah, and that's something he brings up in his Philosophy of Tolkien book too, over and over again. It's like, Tolkien wasn't a moral relativist because at that point in time, not many people were. It's kind of a new thing within our modern society. And he was starting to see seeing the first parts of moral relativism at the time of Tolkien's life, but it wasn't to the extent that it was now. And Tolkien is hearkening back to an older tradition.
It's not the extent, but I think moral relativism has always been around.
Well, yes, but not to the extent.
Yeah, it's not been popularized. It wasn't a dominant philosophy.
Yeah, but now it's the dominant philosophy, especially
because it's really abhorrent.
Yeah,
and you can't run a society in the laws based upon a moral relativism philosophy. And I don't think this book hasn't gotten into that, but I think that's a key part of governance that people miss is, okay, what's the actual foundational basis for criminal laws?
Yeah.
Why? That's why I think a lot of people are so anti-law enforcement and always are siding with the convicts or the criminals as far as lenient sentences or getting them released and all that, because they don't have that foundational theory of, well, they did something wrong and they have to be punished temporarily. Am I pronouncing that right? In their current lifetime, and then temporally, God sorts them out after that. So, what?
No, it's just a funny phrase.
Why?
God sorts them out after that.
Oh, have you heard that?
No, I've heard that before.
Yeah, because I used that in my past tense. Used that in my jury's selection process. Because when I was a prosecutor, I'd need to get people off that jury who were not moral relativists. That's a whole different difficulty. But I had to find out who were the moral absolutists, the Christian fundamentalists that refused to sit in judgment of another person. And so if you forget to ask them that, you're going to end up, there's a good chance you get one out of the group of them that will be, it won't be a not guilty. It'll just never be a guilty.
Interesting.
Because they're like, that's not for me to judge.
Yeah.
Well, actually it is. It's your job. So they misinterpret the word judge, meaning, God's the ultimate judge of your soul and your person and your, after you die. But that doesn't mean we don't all make moral judgments now. And so what are your thoughts about? Well, he mentioned that Well, about that whole idea of this is the first. Well, we already talked about that. It's the first society that's based on moral relativism, and this character, the absolutist, is trying to explain how that moral absolutism, that foundational belief in the right and wrong, is necessary for a functioning society. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think
share your thoughts.
Of course, I think we're going to agree with the absolutist for the most part throughout this book.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the agree. Just give me your thoughts. What do you think? Is that a necessary element for our government and our society to have?
I think so. I think absolutely.
Why?
Because, you need to have some conception of right or wrong. If everything is just relative to something else, then you have no solid foundation on which to base, criminal law, like you said, but everything else in a society. Why is it right to even, live under the people that we live under, in terms of government structure, if we have no idea of, what's right or wrong? If everything's just my way and however I perceive things, then we'd all be anarchists, I think, to an extent.
Well, that the modern leftists have this kind of hierarchy that they've adopted of individuals and classes and victimhood. What are your thoughts of that being an effective in its own way structure as far as the criminal law?
I don't think it's effective at all because, I think some things are right and some things are wrong, no matter, where you're coming from, no matter what your status is in life. Because I think a lot of the times is like the position on the left is, well, you see these people doing X, illegal activity. Well, that's because they've experienced X hardship to their like whole group of people in the past, and it's removing the individual, I'm not thinking of the right word, but the individual action there. It's not thinking of
individual
them.
Character or moral decisions or
exactly. It's not thinking
or good or bad.
Because everything is explained away. Oh, well, this is just a societal thing. You've taken a lot of the individual out of a lot of life, a lot of the individual responsibility. I think among the left is a lot of the prevailing idea.
Well, it certainly complicates things because you have to look at it in like the context of society or or each situation has to be treated as an individual series of facts and preconditions. But, like our traffic law is not based upon moral law.
Yeah.
So their argument would be, it's not immoral to speed, but we've done studies showing that if we don't punish any speeding, then we'll have increased rates of death and destruction on our highways. And so we're going to pass this law to say, well, you can't go, as Sammy Hagar would say, you now can't drive 55, to paraphrase him. But why can't we just have a criminal code based upon, situational ethics in the sense that it's based upon the situation? We have to make it illegal to rob banks, or else we'd have too many banks robberies. So it's really just a practical definition, and then we have to look at whether they really knew it was you're not supposed to do it based upon their individual circumstances. Can't you do that without a Bible or some other higher authority as a basis of moral law as a foundation of your criminal justice system?
I don't think so, because I don't know how we would ever arrive at the conclusion. Like, because you think. I think in a society where those laws have already been set, I think it is possible, but I don't think you can set those laws without having some sort of higher moral authority.
Well, we're talking about right now, so we haven't set. And now we're just going to say, well, we're not saying anybody's good or bad. Why can't we just administer it now that's already been established?
Because then I think you'd see a devolution of all the laws. Because once you take away, there is some sort of higher moral authority, then everybody starts thinking, well, why is this law even in place? What is this? So, because it's like I was saying kind of earlier, it's like then you kind of devolve into anarchy. And it's like, well, why does this law have any right to exist in the first place? And I think you'd see lesser and lesser sentences for crimes and stuff like that. And it would just kind of go down the ladder.
Well, I think, and I tend to agree with you, of course, but I think the real problem is not that the criminals don't believe in the moral basis for it. It's that the justice system itself doesn't understand.
And that's what I meant. It's like if you're a judge who has no belief in a higher moral power,
yes.
I think over time you're going to start, not recognizing the importance of the law at all.
Yeah.
Because you don't have any belief in something higher, in any sort of higher concept of justice or right or wrong, and then everything's just a practical case of, situational dependent everything.
Yep. It's legalisms.
Yeah.
was it prohibited, and did you do that prohibited thing no matter whether it was good or bad?
And that's a big problem with, I think, just about every field of study now, not just the law, but every, especially humanities-focused stuff, is that everybody, in academia thinks, well, everything's just a social construct. There's no higher meaning, no higher purpose behind anything, and so everything could just be deconstructed and nothing's important anymore.
Yeah. And it not having the moral element at the forefront, you're having a harder time distinguishing between defendants. Those that are more culpable morally as opposed to those that are less culpable morally, but they've done similar acts. It used to be a lot easier. And I'll give like an example would be the difference between let's use, we just had January, the third anniversary of the greatest attack on the United States in the history of the United States.
And ever since, by the way, the United States has ceased to exist.
Well, that was the whole point, wasn't it, of January 6th? That they wanted to destroy democracy. And I didn't catch Biden's most recent speech, but I should probably watch it back. But in any event, I think that's a big part of the problem with the prosecutions of those people involved is that there are people, and you see this with any protest or outbreak of group violence. You have some that really went there to do something bad, and then others that were just present while bad stuff was happening. And then you have this group that's in the middle that was not really intending to do anything bad, but got swept up.
Yeah.
And of course, the first group that I described, the ones that really were looking to F up somebody, basically, when they showed up, and there were some of them there, they should be punished. The people, the third group, or the second group, I guess you'd say, on the polar end of that, where they're just there, they shouldn't be punished at all. And then the group in the middle that kind of got swept up, somewhere in between those two, and you have to do it case by case. But I just noticed that the assistant U.S. or maybe it's a U.S. attorney, Graves, has announced their. I think they've rounded up enough people that actually went in the Capitol. Now they're going to round up the people that were just outside.
It's absurd.
Yeah, it really is, and I think that's. But I would say this: the other thing, getting back to the discussion of this book, and I think where the book was headed before they took a break at the end of the first chapter, where the discussion was going, is that he mentions that the fundamental necessary first step to have a moral philosophy in a functioning society is the love of the truth. And that will lead you to having moral absolutes. What are your thoughts of that? Because you don't often hear that argument that, because the argument is, well, you're not really looking for the truth as a final authority because you just want to follow the Bible or the Torah or the Quran. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really going to become the central feature of this book is what is true, just from the beginning. Because even before, like, the initial question is even posed about, why moral absolutism is important, that the characters go off on a side tangent. I don't know if you noticed that, but they start talking about what is the truth. Yes. And Libby says, the truth really means relevance. And then Issa responds, truth means truth and relevance means relevance, but only some truths are relevant, and those are the only ones worth spending time on.
Yeah. I like that.
I think that's a great
argument. Quote. And that, I think he mentions, who do you cite for that? It wasn't Mill, was it?
I don't think there was a citation for that exact one.
Yeah. Or is it William James? William James, a philosopher, talked about whether or not a lot of philosophy is meaningless because as Hillary Clinton would say, what difference does it make at this point? And if it doesn't make any difference, then it might be a nice theoretical discussion, but it has no practical benefit to anybody. And so So that was part of the discussion.
Yeah. But I think at that point theirs is really ahead of his time for kind of predicting where this line of thinking would go, because this was written in 1999.
That's right. Yeah.
And this is before really the whole outbreak of my truth is everything. I think that's the exact point that I think Libby's talking about, is that, if you define everything to relevance, then really just describing how everything's relevant to you. Everything becomes your truth. Everything becomes, very self-centered, egocentric.
Yeah.
Kind of goes down that path of, whatever's important to me is the only thing that matters, without searching for the higher truth of everything.
Yes.
Everything's subjective.
Yeah, he really was. People were talking about this moral relativism and my truth for decades before this book was even written, but it really became popularized and really spread through the education system. Yeah. And now there's so many people in your generation that that are aghast if somebody of my generation would say, there is no your truth or my truth. There's just the truth, and you're either right or you're wrong.
Yeah,
and that is or correct or incorrect. I guess you'd say if it's not a moral discussion. But that reminds me of I think I might have mentioned this before in a previous episode. When I was a young prosecutor, there was a judge who was deeply suspicious of the police on occasion, and so she was ruling against me on a particular issue. I can't even remember what the issue was, and I said, "Well, Judge, I'm sorry, but I think based upon the facts, as you've found them in the law, I think you have to. This is a preliminary hearing. So you have to bind that defendant over for further proceedings, meaning that I won the hearing." And she didn't listen to me the first time, so I knew another case was coming up. So I had cases that said if these things are there, then you have to do, this person's guilty. Yeah. And so I said, Judge, here I have extra copies. The second time I argued with her, I said I have these copies of these cases that support my position, and I don't think you have any choice as a judge. I think the only appropriate thing for you to do is rule in my favor. And judges don't like to hear that. And I'm sure I was even more blunt back when I was younger than I just described it. And I remember to this day the angry look on her face. She's a real nice lady too, but the look of rage coming out of her eyes, and she said, I don't need your case law, Mr. Bishop. I know how to do my job. And that's when I said, my case law? Judge, I thought it was our case law. And with a smirk. And, oh, Mr. Bishop, and then she laughed. And she still ruled against me. Oh, but it was the same kind of thing as, it's not your truth. It's not my truth. It's our truth. That there is no separate understanding of what is real or what is not real.
It's just the truth. Right. I mean, it's beyond any human being, really. It's right. Something beyond any of our perception of what it is. Our perception can be entirely right or wrong, but the truth is unchanging. It will always be the truth.
Yeah, and I think that's really, and the authors are obviously getting to that in this discussion. That is the foundational question
of moral absolutism.
And back to my original discussion about do you agree that this is the first society that is going to be based, that is really at this point based all the leadership, all the leadership in both parties, all of our political overlords or elected officials, if you want to be polite about it. And our leadership in academia and in industry generally, there's exceptions, of course, generally are moral relativists.
I mean, I think to an extent, yes. Because I think it kind of comes back to...
You are wrong. It is not to an extent. It is true. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you. But I think it's moral relativism as long as their side is the one that everybody agrees with. Because everybody's...
That's what it is. Why do you say to an extent? You're agreeing with me.
Yes. But let me finish my point. Because it's kind of like this. Yes. It's kind of like the point about like the lie of values neutrality that, Josh Hammer's a big proponent of. It's like, well, under name, our government is neutral on things. That's what they propose to be. They don't have any agenda. They're just, out there and they do, numbers-based stuff. It's not really like anything. They're not pushing any values. But everybody is pushing values. I think even a moral relativist is an absolutist on some things. They are not whatever goes for whatever other person I won't infringe on, because clearly, every moral relativist has their own opinions about stuff. They will never be, do whatever you want. I think under name, I think academia and our government is a moral relativist and everything is kind of subjective to them, but they have their own opinions. They have their own agenda that they want to push on people that they believe is absolutely true. Yes. So I think in name and in principle, yes, but in practice, they are still pushing their own absolute ideology.
So I guess your answer would be no, because it's just a different type of moral absolutism.
I think it's moral absolutism that they want people to like by pretending it's relative.
Yes, that makes sense. So your answer is not that you would agree that it's moral relativism as the dominant philosophy, because it's not. It's in fact just a different flavor of moral absolutism.
I think
but
so.
they're dishonest about it.
Yes, I think so. Because I mean, you take like the LGBT stuff. You know, it's everything's relative about
You
that.
can take it. I don't want it. You take it.
But it's like the whole premise is let everybody do whatever they want, let everyone believe whatever they want to believe. Everything's subjective, whatever your personal experience says. But if I go out there and say gay marriage isn't real marriage because I believe in the Catholic definition of marriage,
Yes.
I'd be flagged as a hate crime, hate speech. That is against our absolute moral code. We affirm this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're pretending that everything is relative. Everybody do whatever you want until you oppose what they really believe.
Yes, that is the answer.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So, I'm interested in this discussion that he has these fictional characters having, because he's saying, because she asked the question, well, if I believe, if I know I'm right that moral relativism is the proper philosophy in life, aren't I also a seeker of truth, which he says is the first mission of all moral people, and this Issa character agrees that yes, because that's the first step. And I like the distinction that the moral absolutist makes between atheists who are good, conscientious atheist people who are seeking truth above all else because they're open to the possibility of maybe God, and those people have higher value to this character than as somebody who goes to church and has knowledge of the Word of God but doesn't really believe it because it's inconvenient.
Yeah.
And will not, and is basically rejecting it, even though that person pretty much knows it's the truth. It's just inconvenient. What are your thoughts of that?
I mean, I agree.
I mean, do you agree with that synopsis of part of the book?
Yeah.
I got some of that right.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Yes. No, I agree with your synopsis, and I agree with the point that he's making is that there's so many people out there. I mean, it kind of all goes back to what I was saying earlier. There's so many people that claim to be I know what's right and I know what's true, but they don't put it into practice at all. And it's just this idea of the very lukewarm whatever, just kind of going along with the flow of things that doesn't really lead you to seeking the truth at all.
Yeah. Going back, I'm really interested in this topic because the left wing political philosophy is so strident in their beliefs, and so they have such a contempt and condemnation for the traditional religious people, the Catholics and the Christians and the Baptists. I mean, they hate us with such fervor, such religious fervor. But at the same time, I think that their religious belief is a form of moral relativism too, though. I mean, I think they have absolutes, but it's relative, and you can see how they have these heretics, of course, among them, but they who believe in truth, justice, and the American way, and those are heretics, or like the traditional homosexuals are now heretics of the new religion, which is really entertaining. Because they don't believe, because they especially like the bisexuals, or really just a garden variety homosexual. It's like, wait a second, I am a guy and I like having sex with other guys. I'm a homosexual, and now you're saying this girl who dresses up as a guy is now a guy, and so if I have sex with this girl who is dressed up as a guy, what does that make me as a homosexual man? It makes me heterosexual, or am I bisexual now? And so it's really kind of fun to hear these discussions and these arguments between these parties, because they change the definitions of what gender roles and all that kind of stuff are. Of course, I've talked repeatedly about how much fun I think the transgenders are, and how they're dealing with feminists, especially feminist athletes. Because the feminist athletes, we have this whole, sports system set up for the benefit of women, because on the average, they cannot compete at the highest level with men of the same age, for various reasons. And so now these men are dressing up as women and doing swimming, and the guy that does the rugby, man, that guy's funny. He's just killing people. Yeah. I mean, he's just cracking skulls. There was one guy who was an MMA fighter. I don't know if you saw him. The big rap on him was that he didn't tell anybody. he was transgender. And he went in there and he actually broke a gal's skull.
Oh, I did hear about that.
And Joe Rogan was all over that. He's like, that's not fair.
Clearly.
Even though he's like a leftist. So those kind of conflicts are coming up in the orthodoxy of their religion and dealing with their heretics, and now they're out people. But when you really get down to it, every time there's a crime, they even with involves these disputes, that they always end up debating, the different situation and the different classification that people are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what are your thoughts on whether or not this movement really is a religion that has set beliefs, or if I guess maybe it's just so amorphous.
Yeah.
Maybe it depends. It's always a dependency.
I think it is always depends, because that's really the foundation of what they believe. I think it's really this sort of branch of this sort of Marxist idea that everything's dependent, and we've kind of moved away from class necessarily, but everything's dependent upon your race maybe, or everything's dependent upon X label that we put on you. And I think really, their core tactic is sort of this idea of obfuscation, to use a big word, that it's always about sort of muddling or hiding kind of what really happened. We're using, and this is kind of something I've been thinking about for a while, trying to formulate my own philosophy of language, I guess. But it's like, if you look at what the left says is the correct word, it's always talking around the thing itself.
Yeah.
It's right. So we always attach labels to things that don't really mean anything to most like normal people. It's like, look at all the labels for like the LGBT stuff. The ordinary person does not know what half of those words mean.
Correct.
Those just aren't words in our vocabulary. Yeah. And so it's this idea of just talking around things and assigning these sort of nonsense labels, these sort of buzzwords that we just attach to stuff that make things, I think, sound intelligent and sound like, oh, we're so more advanced than we were, 20 years ago. We're so much closer to the truth. When really we're just talking around the truth. I think we're hiding the truth. We're obfuscating it. We're hiding it behind all these words that don't mean anything.
Yeah, and it seems like the current movement and the power structure in the United States in particular, which I think is starting to get rejected by Europe, oddly enough, because we've gone so far off the reservation. But like Supreme Court Justice Jackson, when she was just a nominee, she was asked the question famously, excuse me, like, what is a woman? And she could not answer. She says, I'm not a biologist.
Yeah.
But I don't think you need to be a biologist to know the definition of a word. Because it wasn't the question.
If you did, I'd be out of a job.
Yeah. Well, you don't have a job yet. But you, when you're asking for a definition of a word, they didn't say, hey, look over there to that person in row 3. Is that person a man or a woman? Well, maybe you need to be, depending how confused the person is and what has happened to that person physically, it may or may not be an easy question to answer just by looking at him or her. But for a Supreme Court judge to say, I can't answer the definition of what is a woman. It's like it's such a foundational concept of humanity in a society, and that refusal to define things, I think, has become a defining moment for that movement, don't you think?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the obfuscation. It's I think that's really where the relativism comes in, is when we look at definitions. It's like, well, my idea of a woman is different than yours. If I just believe that I am a woman, no matter what that word means, that makes me a woman. Yeah. Or if I believe that I am, X category of person, whatever you want at this point now, then my belief is what makes it true, rather than the actual meaning, rather than the concept that we've all agreed upon for thousands of years now in human language. There's not a human language that ever disagrees on what the definition of woman is.
Right.
That's not a thing that happens. You don't just have mass confusion among speakers of a language because nobody can agree on what this means except the scientists in that group of people. Yeah. That's just not how human language works. But we've gotten to this point where they're applying the relativism to all of language, and that it's just we're sort of, well, we can't say anything about it unless we have the right degree or unless we have the right certification, which is just not how language works. It's absurd. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's such an interesting topic, and it's fascinating. And I wish it were just a theoretical discussion. Yeah. And when I was your age, it would have been a bizarre theoretical discussion for some young philosophy students to talk about at the bar. You know, well, what if the definition of woman was that you can just decide what your gender is or your sex is? then what are these permutations? What happens if we have that?
That is
now
something,
we're living it.
Yeah, and that is something you get in like really high level linguistic stuff. Is like, well, how do we even process meanings of words? How do we like actually come to agreed upon definitions?
Yeah.
But it's not something that's ever been conscious to like speakers of a language.
Right.
That's just not something
Correct.
that crosses
Right.
people's minds. There's no confusion about definitions. We just accept definitions because we understand what they mean. That's how language happens.
Well, this whole discussion about Title IX athletes has been so revelatory to people who are feminists, who have been saying all along that men and women are equal or the same. And have the same abilities. So there's still women primarily, but there's some men that believe that a woman can do anything a man can do on average, and or even in individual cases, and it's just not accurate. There was a little video I saw the other day of a guy who was, I guess he just happened upon, or he was up at a track for some reason. There was a D1 female athlete, 400-meter runner. And somehow, in his arrogance, he challenged her to a race. Well, she beat him, but not by much. And this is a guy that doesn't run.
Yeah.
and I'm like, and she posted it on some sort of social media, maybe it was TikTok or something, and was trying to shame him. And I'm thinking, you idiot! You're supposed to be like one of the fastest people on the planet as a D1 400-meter runner, and through 200 meters he was with you, and he's just some knucklehead off the street. Yeah. And I bet you if he trained for 2 months, he'd beat her. I mean, you could just from watching the video, I bet you he could beat her in 2 months. But that whole discussion and forcing those issues to the forefront of, okay, what are we even talking about here, has been really entertaining. I just wish it was just theoretical or just a skit in a silly movie that we would say that could never happen in real life. But we're living it, and it's really scary. And I really enjoy the man of the street interviews where they ask people, define a woman or a man or whatever, and they start off with other questions which they're able to answer, but then they get to that and they're like, oh, I don't want to talk about that, because they know what the right answer is. I should say they know what the correct answer is, but they don't know what the right answer is. And I think that tends to prove the point of this author through his character Issa, that moral relativism cannot be the foundational or the predominant philosophy of any functioning society.
I'd be surprised because this was written 25 years ago. I'd be curious to know if he ever predicted, we'd get to this point in time, or if the whole moral relativism would have collapsed by now, where people can't even agree on definitions because everything's so relative. I wonder if he would have even seen that coming, because that's not something that I would have ever thought of if I was living 25 years ago, that we can't just agree on what words mean.
Yeah, I was surprised by it, and I tend to be cynical about the levels of depravity in society, but I think I mentioned to you before, I was expecting the next movement to be bigamy, legalized bigamy, and then the next one would be bestiality. Which makes a lot more sense logically, for crying out loud, than, hey, I'm a 6'3", 220-pound guy wearing a dress. I'm going in that girl's locker room. Whoa, wait, what? Yeah. That's I don't think anybody really envisioned that being accepted. Now, having said that, there have been, well, I'm going to use the terms they don't like. There have been transvestites, like the movie Some Like It Hot. Which is a Don Lemon, Tony Curtis movie. Great movie. One of the best comedies ever made. I haven't talked to you about this one. You should watch this movie. It's really funny. It's about two musicians in like the 1940s gang warfare, and they happen to watch like this an assassination like the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, And these guys get killed, and so they're on the run from the mob. And so they dress up. They find out that there's a women's big band that's touring the country, and so they get dressed up in drag just to get out of town to avoid these gangsters, and also don't want to be found by the police either, to make them witnesses or maybe think they're involved in that. But the very can I tell you the ending?
Sure.
No, maybe I shouldn't tell you the ending.
Okay,
it's a really funny joke. The funniest joke at the very end. There was a man who became enamored with the Jack Lemmon female character, and they're escaping on a boat. And the last line of the movie is just really, really funny. but it's a subject to humor. But I've talked to you before about even like ancient Greek writings. They're talking about these kind of gender bending issues, and well, maybe Roman. No, that was Greek.
Both did a little bit.
Yeah. It's so I think it's a common thing throughout human history. I don't think that there's any new sins.
Yeah.
I think men and women have been sinning for a long time and doing kind of what you call aberrations of the moral code all throughout history. That's why you have a moral code. But but I think that the author, getting back to the book, this long monologue, I think the author is right on in the mix of it about. I don't think there has been a society that didn't have some sort of fixed moral code and then deal with it going from there.
Yeah.
You think of all these different kingdoms. I mean, even the Mayans. I mean, they had a moral code of sorts. Any other thoughts? I don't know if I think I hit the main things that I wanted to say.
I thought there was. I wanted to bring up one point that they made here is that Issa talks about the spread of essentially Western values, and I think this is the reason why he gives the absolutist character to a Muslim character who would kind of be an outsider to the West a little bit. But I think if I had read this, probably 10, 15 years ago or whatever, I would very much disagree with this point, but he sees, the character of Issa sees like the spread of American culture as a disease that's essentially going to like ruin the world. And I think, and this was written in 1999. Right. So this is like right after fall of the Soviet Union, American, sort of superiority is at an all-time high. Yeah. And so I think, if people were reading that at this time, I think a lot of people would be shocked by that. Like, why would you give this point to this character that we're supposed to agree with, that we should be disgusted by the spread of American culture? America's the best, America's great. But I think he's spot on. I think that's exactly where we're at. Because now the spread of American culture means the spread of that moral relativism. I think that's how the rest of the world views America, as this country with no moral code anymore. Let everybody do whatever they want. Yes. And I think that's been disastrous for a lot of people.
And they find it repulsive.
Yes.
And the immigrant community in Europe finds it repulsive. And it takes advantage of it. It's really, really quite wonderful to watch in a kind of a scary, spooky way.
Yeah,
it's a good point.
I like the line he says. He says, "In fact, I'd call America Dracula, and all of the cultures its victims. They're getting paler and paler. Soon, all the blood will be gone."
Yeah,
you're losing a lot of what makes other cultures as they kind of just fall in line with this moral relativist idea. It all becomes just sort of a homogenous nothing, really.
Yeah. I will say this: like in '99, I think
I wasn't alive then.
Part of the reason why I think the author picked the Muslim fundamentalists as the main person. This was before 9/11.
Yes, of course.
But not before Islamic terrorism. I mean, I think this would have been after the World Trade Center bombing, because I don't know if you knew this, but it was bombed first. They tried to blow up in the basement, so one tower would topple onto the other tower and then collapse. But there was, the USS Cole bombing. There's a bunch of terrorist attacks against the so-called Great Satan of the United States, and so I think it's also was even at the time considered a protected religion where crosses were famously dipped in urine for an art display. I think prior to this date. And all sorts of crazy, sacrilegious things just for show, and nobody was ever punished. But they knew not to mess with the Muslims. Yeah,
and I think, and I like the discussion they have. Just to go a little bit more to the book, because the character of Libya is like, America is one of the most Christian nations, most religious people. Right. Just in terms of percentage, you label that. Isn't that the solution to all these things? And the character Issa says, not if the religion is relativistic as the society, not if the doctor is as sick as the patient. A God made in the world's image can't save the world. You see, American religion wants to make you feel good and be comfortable, not to shock you or scandalize you. I think that's become even more true since he wrote this, absolutely.
For sure, and less people are even saying they're Christian.
Yeah, that's true. Because there's just, the other ideology of just, do whatever you want, be comfortable, do what makes you happy. I think this widespread sort of hedonism, I think, is becoming the very dominant religion in America, for sure.
Yes.
And that is, I think I absolutely agree with the character on the spread of that is a major issue.
Yes.
Do you have any other thoughts on this first chapter of this book for season 7?
No, I mean, other than it's an entertaining read, and if anybody, it's maybe 200 pages. If anybody's interested, get out, maybe not get it off Amazon, but that'd be the easiest way to get
Yeah,
it.
not even 200 pages. It's
Excuse me.
177, including the afterword. So
Yeah, so it's a fast read. It's a good book. I'm really impressed
so
with the
far,
author.
at least the first chapter out of 11. But
you
I'm
could
sure
tell.
great. Yeah. But yeah, I'm looking forward to looking into the next chapters and seeing what comes next. And I like that it's just given us more of a jumping off point rather than just here's
Yes.
what the book said. So
Yep.
I think this will be a good season.
Sounds good.
All right, well, this has been Season 7, Episode 1 of Unlimited Opinions. You can, of course, follow us on Twitter for updates on when the next episode will be live at ULMTD Opinions. It's ULMTD Opinions on Twitter. I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
I'm glad we're keeping that going. 152 episodes in, I think.
It's a lot of episodes.
It is.